All right, so what we're going to do in this video is go over some of my favorite places to find textures for when I'm creating materials in my 3D projects. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so as I mentioned, I did try to focus primarily on free resources, but a lot of these websites do offer some kind of paid content here as well, whether it's high resolution images, substance materials, that type of thing. So the first website I want to talk about is Texturescom. Now, you do have to create an account in order to access some of this content. But if you come over here to library, you'll see they have a whole bunch of different content, whether it's PBR materials, something like this. And should you find a material you want, often what you can do is come in here and then download the images for free. Now, sometimes, and I shouldn't say sometimes, the majority of the time you are going to be somewhat limited to the resolution you can download here. So you can see a lot of these are locked at 1024 by 1024. Oftentimes that's good enough, depending on how close you're going to get to this with your camera, how many times it's going to tile or repeat. So, like I said, usually this works just fine. However, if you do need something more higher resolution, this may not be the place to go. And while you can kind of choose things or buy things kind of per material, I do believe they also offer some kind of subscription or something like that. Though I could be wrong because it's been a while since I've actually used this website or paid for it, I should say. Another one of my favorites is the SketchUp Texture Club. Now, this is somewhat similar to textures.com. You can come over here, click on textures, and a lot of these websites also offer other things like models and whatnot. This one does have some free PBR textures/materials here. Even beyond that, you can click on a few of the different categories and kind of see what they have here. Going to say bricks, for instance. And they really do have quite a few options. And very much like the previous site, usually you can get the images, or if you do have an account or have paid for whatever subscription or however they do things, you can end up with higher resolution images or other maps. Now, I will say this one, it's also free to at least create an account, but the amount it costs to actually be able to download the higher resolution stuff is actually pretty reasonable. I think it's something like $10, $13, something like that. Definitely one of my favorite places because of, how affordable it is. So you can download up to 15 low and medium resolution textures per day, it says. And I could have swore I saw something somewhere about it being, $13. Okay, 13 euros a year, $14 to access that. And I've done this a number of times in the past. I actually think it used to be a bit more, but still can't complain about it being $13, $14. So next up is the C4D Center. Now, they too are trying to sell you something, though with them, it's a material library. And that's an interesting point with this stuff, is if you're going to pay for just the textures, why not pay for a material library where the material itself is already created for you? And there's definitely some uses for that. I've talked previously how I subscribe to Grayscale Gorilla Plus. That comes with a lot of materials. But I like this free material library they have because it does include a number of different maps, and these are higher resolution, typically around 4K, though it does, depend on the image. And the maps can vary a little bit as well, depending on the material. But I really like this website. The one downside I have with this website is there's no way to search here. You have to kind of come down here and choose the different categories. But aside from that, really nice resource for textures. And, look, they also sell material libraries. They also sell some Redshift training, whatever. But the free material library is really why I come to this website. Next up, we have Ambient CG, which once again, similar to what we've been seeing, where we do have a lot of resources, textures available. These have a lot of nice categories here, as well as the ability to search, which I think is very helpful. Especially when you're trying to find a specific pattern or material here. So just clicking on a random one to kind of see what we end up with here. And because I do think that's important to kind of get a sense of what you can expect with these, whether it's a single texture, whether it's a substance, whether it's individual maps, different resolutions they offer, all of that stuff, is important. And Ambient CG here does do a pretty good job of having a PBR material and allowing you to download the full high resolution images, sometimes up to 12K, which is kind of crazy and probably overkill for most projects. But there are going to be times where you may need something really, really high resolution. Being able to find something like that can be very helpful. So this is a great resource, one that I use quite a bit. I will also say with these websites, especially if they're going to give you a material, sometimes it also depends on the render engine you use. Sometimes, like for instance, here you can actually, C4D Center, you can download. What you download is actually a regular standard or physical material setup with these maps. And so if you're using something like Redshift or Octane, you're going to have to kind of create it from scratch. So do know that there may be a little bit more setup there. Whereas if it's a substance, then most renderers have a way of kind of working with those instead of loading them in completely from scratch. Polyhaven / Texture Haven, or the texture section of it, is another nice resource. I really wish they would come out with this Blender add-on for Cinema 4D, like similar to what the Sketchfab plugin does. But these are also pretty good, and maybe not quite as many as some of the other websites. I've mentioned Texturescom, the SketchUp Texture Club, but you can see you're able to get a sense of the texture, what it looks like up close, the different maps it has. And you do want to be a bit careful with these places because, not all maps are created equally. So for instance, color is one thing, but typically in a color image or base color or albedo, you want to avoid a lot of shadows because you want your lighting to be able to add the shadows. So in this particular case, I am seeing some of those shadows, and that can make it harder, especially when you get into your other maps like this. I think they're calling this clay. Okay. But ambient occlusion, right? Looks like they've actually gone through here and taken out the shadows in that. Great. Same thing with displacement. So what you want to double check with these is that, they're not just different versions of the same map. It's not something that's just been desaturated. It's something that's had some work done on it to make it, work for its intended purpose. So displacement here is really meant for the higher level details, the larger details, the parts of the objects are going to be the material that's going to be higher or lower. It's really the bump or normal where you're going to get a lot of that smaller, finer detail. And so that's what you want to take a look for when you're looking at these images, downloading them, and creating your materials from them. Okay. Textures, this one, or Polygon, I should say, I was a bit hesitant to throw this one in here because the amount of free materials they have is quite limited. But if you are open to paying, then I do think there's a little bit more value there. So they do have some free materials, like I said, but they also have a lot of paid ones. And so you can see it's $5 if you want to just buy it straight up, or if you have a subscription, you still have to pay it for it. Though perhaps you're able to kind of get it as part of that package or subscription. But a lot of these websites, like I said, also offer models or HDRIs. And so it can be nice to find a website where it's just a single place you can go to find materials, to find HDRIs, perhaps even 3D models. Now, one last little thing I want to talk about or mention when it comes to finding textures, there's obviously Google image search, but you do want to be a bit careful with that, at least from a copyright perspective. And kind of along those same lines, AI image generation can also be used to create some textures for materials. Now, I'm not trying to get into whether or not you should or it's the legal part of it, since I think you could certainly make the argument that a lot of the AI image stuff is just using other people's stuff to come up with its own. But I do think it will ultimately be a useful tool for creating things, and I think creating textures is not a bad way to use this. So it doesn't come out perfectly every time. These were some simple prompts I used in Midjourney. You can even see them just, wood plank tileable texture, brick wall tileable texture, and usually get maybe one that works. And then you can just create variations on that. And if there's enough interest, I could definitely go into more depth about using something like Midjourney to create some textures. But like I said, it doesn't always work. Here's one where I did asphalt road tileable texture, and I really don't have anything I could use. So perhaps with a little bit more work coming up with a prompt and working with some variations, then It could, but that is also something I might consider if you're just not finding, what you're looking for when it comes to different textures. So that will do it for this video. If there's anything else you would like to see, please let me know. And until next time, take care.